American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tellustrate video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
What time is it? Game time! It's gonna be special. They gonna talk about this forever.
Welcome to American Football Stories.
Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Bringing together the many perspectives that make up college football in the NFL.
Football is one of the greatest sports ever invented.
From players and coaches.
Believe, baby, believe, baby.
Hey, we playing to win right here, fellas.
To the front office and scouts.
The public is finally beginning to catch up, but they don't even know half the truth.
Us against the world, let's get it.
Your hosts, Robert Parker and Nick Knudsen, bring you American Football Stories.
Welcome to the American Football Stories podcast brought to you by Coach Paint. My name is Nick Knudsen. My co-host is Robert Parker. Today is January 12th, 2021, and we'll break down last night's college football playoff national championship game between the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Early on, it appeared the Buckeyes were poised to make this a fight, but the inevitability that is Alabama football took over and crushed any hope of an upset. The Crimson Tide captured a sixth national title under Nick Saban. The man's only been in Tuscaloosa for 12 years, so every other year he's winning a national title down there. And my general reaction to the game is, well, another year, another Alabama title. Obviously, this game wasn't a classic, but let's start to break down how we arrived at a 52-24 final score. Ohio State opened the game behind the 8-ball when Trey Sermon left after the first play for what appeared to be a collarbone injury. Fields and the Buckeyes went 3 and out. Alabama then went on a 12-play, 78-yard drive that featured a 22-yard swing pass to Devonta Smith, 12 and 13-yard runs by Najee Harris, who looked unstoppable. Both guys looked unstoppable really most of the night. But the Buckeyes defense clamped down, and they at least made Bama work for the rest of the drive. On 3rd and 3, we saw a severely hobbled Jalen Waddle take a pitch from Mac Jones, and it was just a crossing route, but a simple pitch where he had a little space on the guy, took it 15 yards down the OSU 7-yard line. The Tide ended up punching it in from the OSU 1 on 4th and goal, with Harris easily breaking through for a score. And at this point, you're feeling like it was easy, but at the same time, it was an easy drive for Alabama. But at the same time, Ohio State at least showed a little punch and made them work for it at the end. So you were wondering how the game was going to go, even though it looked fairly easy. But Rob, I'm going to kick it over to you here. It's hard to say how much impact losing Sermon had on the game, since Master Teague and Justin Fields, they gave the running game a little bit of a pulse. They produced 147 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns between them. But with the Buckeyes trying to keep up, Sermon's presence may have been a moot point anyway. It certainly didn't help missing the guy that's accounted for 524 yards rushing over the last 2 outings. But do you think Sermon's loss had a significant impact on Ohio State's ability to move the ball, or do you think that they were going to most likely be headed toward passing the ball for the second half anyway?
Yeah, I would definitely say it made, an impact to a certain extent. But I tell you what, I think, the impact really lied on the defense side of ball for Ohio State. I think, maybe Trey Sermon, if he played the entire game, maybe, he put some runs together and, chew up the clock and help with the time of possession. But for the most part, I think, the offense was playing, catch up pretty much for the whole game. So I think it was more so on the defense side of ball for Ohio State than the offense side of ball.
Well, and we all talked about Justin Fields coming out of that Clemson game, but Trey Sermon carried the ball for 31 times, 31 carries out of the 44 rushes for the Buckeyes in that Sugar Bowl win over Clemson. So you knew he was a part of the game plan. It must have been difficult losing him early, but I feel I don't know how much difference it would have made overall. Alabama, let's flip over to their offense. Their offense was a spectacle to behold right from the start, just as it's been all season. Devonta Smith, absolutely electric. We don't always see the Heisman winner play well in these games, but he gets the bulk of the attention. But every time I watch this Alabama team play, I come away ultra impressed with Najee Harris. He's just he's as good as a back out of the backfield as a receiver as he is running through tackles. Smith put up gaudy numbers on it pretty much in the first half because he got injured early in the second half. 12 or was it early in the second half or late in the first? So I'm blanking on that, but he got injured with his hand and he ended up leaving the game. 12 receptions, 215 yards, 3 TDs, essentially in a half of work. Unbelievable numbers. But I do believe that Harris was the ultimate weapon in this attack last night. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think Najee Harris is probably the most underrated player on this Alabama team. You know, you see Devontae Smith winning the Heisman. You see Mac Jones being a finalist Heisman. I really thought, Najee Harris should have been a finalist Heisman. So I think, with Najee Harris, the things that he can do, just like you said, Nick, running between the tackles and catching the ball out the backfield, I think he's definitely one of the key weapons that this Alabama team has. And it's definitely a different change of pace type of running back than we normally see. He's not the pounder and the bruiser that we've seen with Derrick Henry or the Mark Ingram or the Trent Richardson. It really seems like he fits this Alabama offensive scheme perfect to a T. And then when you have Brian Robinson coming in to spell him, he's just as good. So I think you really don't miss a beat with these running backs that Alabama has. But I know the passing games get all the glory.
Yeah, Harris just you have to account for him, and that opens up the passing game so much too. So I think Harris was the key to that engine. I know Brian Robinson, good backup runner. Alabama just churns out running backs, but man, Najee Harris, special dude. You saw it on display last night. Ohio State, though, they do come back and answer. This wasn't a blowout from start to finish. Ohio State looked game early on here. They pieced together a critical drive to tie the game up at 7-7. It was a 75-yard drive that featured a 20-yard pass to Chris Olave, a 36-yard pass down the seam to tight end Jeremy Ruckert, who made a one-handed grab similar to the one he made in the Big Ten title game against Wisconsin last year. Master Teague runs around the left end for an 8-yard touchdown, untouched. And I think that's something that was important that Ohio State immediately went back and answered. But even still, you felt behind. You just felt behind even when it was tied from a Buckeye perspective here, because now you had to go back and stop the Alabama offense. Alabama goes down, scores again, and goes up 14-7. And at this point, we actually hung at 14-7 for a few drives here. But talk about what that Alabama, what it's like for Ohio State to at least get that answer and hang around early. Did you have any hope early in this game that the Buckeyes were going to hang?
I did. I actually had a little bit of hope early in the game. It kind of seemed like I don't want to make any excuses for Justin Fields and this Ohio State team, and I'm pretty sure they wouldn't want to make any excuses either. But it was clearly obvious that Justin Fields was playing through, an injury, whether it was, his bruised ribs or broken rib or whatever the case may be. You can kind of see him grimacing throughout this whole game.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he gritted it out, and he actually, kind of kept with Alabama early on in this game. But once again, just like I said earlier, it was more so about Ohio State on the defense side of the ball than it was on the offensive side of the ball.
Right. And the next drive, Ohio State allows Alabama to go down the field. And it's pretty much the Najee Harris, Devonta Smith show like we saw all night. But they make them work 11 plays. They make them work over 11 plays to score the touchdown. And that was the thing from Ohio State perspective. You knew Alabama was going to get theirs on offense, but did it encourage you that the Ohio State offense was at least making Alabama? They weren't like giving up just, 3-play drives with, there's another big play. They're making them slowly work down the field, and they're picking up, 12, 15, 22-yard gain type things on the third down maybe, but Ohio State's defense was hanging in for a play or two before they'd give up another big play.
Yeah, you're right about that. It really seems like, I know Sean Wade came out earlier in the week saying, he wanted to match up with Devontae Smith. And I tell you, sometimes you better wish what you asked for because he definitely got Devontae Smith at 100%, and he was game, and he showed that, especially with his gaudy stat line in the first half. But, it just really seems like the defensive scheme that Ohio State laid out, it really didn't work. You kind of had this zone coverage. You had linebackers kind of dropping back, trying to, run with these fast receivers and Jalen Waddle and Michie and Devontae Smith. So it really seemed like the defensive game plan really didn't help Justin Fields in this offense. So I really think, this blowout that we saw, it really turned ugly really quick, especially, going into that halftime, getting early in the second half. I really think, Ohio State didn't play up to their potential on the defense side of the ball. We saw that defense kind of give Trevor Lawrence fits, in that playoff matchup, but they just couldn't sustain it for a full game with Alabama.
Buckeyes take the ball down into Alabama territory on the next drive, down 14-7, but they end up punting just over midfield. This is a huge play. Alabama comes back, and Baron Browning on the second play of the drive blitzes off the edge. Mac Jones sees him late, tries to make a move, but kind of doesn't take care of the ball very well. Browning knocks it out of his hands, recovers on the Alabama 19-yard line, and Justin Fields makes him pay 2 plays later. Ends up, Master Teague runs in for a second TD of the game. It's 14-14. And at this point, I really felt like we were going to be in for a competitive. I was like, okay, Ohio State survived the early onslaught. Here we go. They're making plays. The Buckeyes are going to be game tonight. I did not anticipate this turning into what we saw after that second touchdown.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I didn't see it turning that fast. But once again, when you're Alabama, you're clicking on all cylinders. Like, it's you can't be beat. Like, I've never seen a Nick Saban offense look and run to perfection like it did this whole season, let alone in the championship game. It just seems like, whatever play they wanted to run, they ran it and they got what they wanted. And it really seemed like this Ohio State defense didn't give it any resistance, for the whole game. I know early in the game they kind of stood in there, but for the most part, it's just like they got punched in the face and then they just kind of fell to the wayside. So I give all the credit to this offensive play calling, this new Nick Saban ball that we've been seeing the last couple of years, especially on the offense side of the ball.
Talk about some of that play calling, because I thought the motions that Sark was calling all night, a lot of guys going to motion. It was very like arena football, CFL, like where you'd see a guy go in motion, and that's the guy you're hitting on the swing pass. I mean, it's wide open, but a lot of bubble screens, a lot of stuff to the edges. Did you notice that too, or was that just me? I love the play designs.
I think everyone noticed it because it kind of seemed like Alabama kind of ran that certain type of play, a couple of times in the game, and they got, either a big play or they got a touchdown out of it. So it really just seemed like, this Ohio State defense was one step behind the whole entire game. I know they came up, just like you said, they came up earlier with the forced fumble and the fumble recovery, and they got Justin Fields the ball back on a short field, which he took advantage of. But for the most part, it just seems like, the defense side of the ball for Ohio State was one step behind the entire game.
So Bama goes down the field, they score again, and at this point, you're like, okay, this is just how this game's going to go. Justin Fields has to keep up. Ohio State goes right back down the field. They answer, but they get held up. Fields has a pretty bad series of plays. There was one where he was incomplete. It was almost an interception in the end zone. And he missed a wide open receiver on the first and goal. The second goal, it was almost an interception. They ran up the middle of Master Teague. Third and goal was the near interception where he just flat out missed his tight end. It just overthrew the guy. They end up settling from a field goal from the 6-yard line, 21-17. And we're really getting into the middle of the second quarter here, toward the later stages of the second quarter, and this is where the game got out of control. Alabama goes down the field, another long drive, 75-yard drive, but Ohio State, they get a touchdown, 28-17. Ohio State goes to punt, and Alabama gets another touchdown before the half, and that was the absolute backbreaker, because the punt, the problem with the possession Ohio State had after the 28-17 was they didn't eat any time off the clock, and you left Bama plenty of time to go down the field. They got the ball back with 2 minutes left. They scored in 3 plays. Devontae Smith, you talked about those linebackers trying to go in coverage. Devontae Smith, he ran a nice route where it was, I don't know if it was covered 2 look, but the corner was playing up, the safety was playing more toward the middle, and the linebacker was dropping. And you saw poor tough Borland just running his heart out, trying to keep up with Smith, and Smith just blowing by him for an easy touchdown. Bama's up. All of a sudden, it's 35-17 after what felt like was a relatively competitive first half.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Especially what I've been talking about all night on the pod so far in regards to, just the coverage schemes that Ohio State was running. It really just seemed like, the defense was one step behind once again. Just like you said, Tough Borland is running with Devontae Smith. I tell you what, I don't think you want any linebacker running with Devontae Smith. So when you see that, something's good is going to happen for Alabama. Something bad is going to happen for Ohio State. So, and the good was a touchdown, and the bad was a touchdown right before a half for Ohio State. So I think, just like I said, Ohio State just seems like they wasn't on the page from a defensive scheme that they could compete with Alabama, which, was kind of disappointing if you ask me, because they have the talent. They have the recruits that they can kind of keep up with Alabama, but it just goes to show you the juggernaut that Alabama was this year from the offense side of the ball.
Yeah, Bama, second half, Ohio State comes out. They do put up a touchdown on their first drive, but Bama puts up a touchdown field goal. They took a 45-24 lead into the fourth quarter, and at that point, it was all about running the clock out for Alabama. They did put up one more touchdown. Ohio State failed to score again. Lost a couple of series on downs. Alabama wins 52-24. Another national title for Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide. You talk about being disappointed here if you're the Buckeyes. I get it. Ohio State, you expect to compete with Alabama. That's what your program is built on. It's about competing with anyone. But this Alabama team was something else this year. I'm not hanging my head too much today if I'm a Buckeye fan, because you just got ran out of the building within 3 quarters. There's nothing much to hang your head about. You can't say, oh, if this play went that way or that play went this way or if this call went that way. No, you just got your ass kicked. That's the pure and simple part of it. You got beat, and there's not much you could do about it.
Yeah, pretty much. I know all the talk coming into this game was the fact that, Ohio State only had played, 6 games. They shouldn't be there. It really seems like, they kind of galvanized and got the attention of, everyone outside of football by beating Clemson and knocking off Trevor Lawrence. And it really made people kind of, shut up and say, well, maybe Ohio State should be here. But, they just didn't come to play against Alabama. And I tell you what, I mean, I know you expect to compete with Alabama and the Clemsons of the world, but this was just Alabama's year. They were clicking on all cylinders on the offense side of all ball. I've never seen an Alabama team kind of look like this, especially on the offense side of ball. I mean, ever since Nick Saban made the transition with Tua at quarterback, it just really seemed like this Alabama offense has taken the next step forward. So I think moving forward under Nick Saban, you're going to see the style of play from Alabama on the offense side of ball. I know their defense is not the same Alabama defense that we're typically normally seeing, but at the end of the day, when you have an explosive offense like that, I think it's going to be hard to beat.
The game's evolved. Saban said it himself. You need an offense to win these days, and boy, do they have an offense this year. Unbelievable weapons everywhere. You saw them do this to every single team they played. If Clemson was in this game, it would have been the same score. I just don't think it's like you said, it was Alabama's year. It was Alabama's year. You knew Ohio State had to bring their A-plus game like they did against Clemson. And Ohio State, they played decently early, but they didn't do enough. They didn't do enough here. And losing Trey Sermon might have hurt, but when you're giving up 52 points, Trey Sermon doesn't play defense, dude. He doesn't play defense.
Yeah, you're right about that. Trey Sermon is not out there covering Devontae Smith, right, and not out there making tackles on Najee Harris.
Right.
So,
and this is not going to be. It wasn't never going to be a ball control game where you're running Trey Sermon 30 times and killing clock. It was never going to be like that.
Yeah, it was just an unfortunate. You kind of want to see a more competitive game as a national championship game, but just like I said, this was Alabama's year. It really seemed like they're the juggernaut, and in order to beat Alabama, you was going to have to outscore them. We kind of saw that pattern kind of play out to that particular topic what we're discussing in the SEC championship with Florida. So Florida, they put up points with them, but the thing about it, not only can you got to put up points with Alabama, you got to get those necessary stops, and you got to convert on them. You can't kick field goals, so you got to score. So it really was a shootout, and I think Alabama's offense would definitely win the shootout, even if Ohio State was scoring a little bit more points. With a healthy Justin Fields, I really just think, this Alabama's offense was just hitting on all cylinders. Sark has been dialing up, perfect play calls all season long, getting his playmakers in open space and letting them do what they got to do to get in the end zone. And, that's the type of offense that you have when Nick Saban evolves and he gets those play callers, and he already has that talent. And you just got to get those guys the ball. So I just think this Alabama's team this year was definitely one of the best Nick Saban Alabama's team that I've seen, win the national championship.
It also, the other thing too is this Buckeye team was really good this year, and they were a big part of the reason why the Big Ten even played football this year, was because they knew they had this team that could go out and get that playoff money. And why they changed the rules to allow them the Big Ten title game. Look, I've been critical of the Big Ten in their approach to this pandemic. My big issue is not their decision itself to not play. It was that they did it on their own and they tried to force the hand of the other conferences. That was garbage. And I thought the Big Ten should have paid for it. So Ohio State shouldn't have been in the playoff. But man, did I, like, after watching Justin Fields in that Sugar Bowl, I'm sure glad Ohio State was in the playoff. All right. So that was my take on it going in, but I'm glad they were. They definitely deserved to be in the field. You had to overcome a lot just to play this year if you're Ohio State. A lot of adversity off the field. And granted, no part of our society has been untouched by this. All right. You've seen weddings and funerals and everything else in this world. So the Buckeyes are not dealing with anything that any of us haven't dealt with all year. Right. However, you have to stop and give this team credit for having the focus, the intensity, the discipline to get it done, because I think that even though it was a short season and everyone wants to rip on them for only playing 8 games, they got here. They got to this moment. That is a big accomplishment. I think it says a lot for what's going on in Columbus. And as long as Ryan Day's at the helm there, you got to be excited about the future of Buckeye football.
Yeah, I think you got to be, definitely optimistic moving forward. I think, when you're the Ohio State Buckeyes, you're going to get those top-notch recruits. Ryan Day is a hell of a coach. You know what he can do from an offense side of the ball. And they're going to get the playmakers that they need to get on the defense side of the ball. So I think moving forward, if you're Ohio State, I know this loss hurts, but at the end of the day, you're going to be in the mix of things moving forward. You're going to be one of those top teams mentioning in the playoffs year in and year out. The Clemsons of the world, the Ohio States of the world, the Alabamas of the world. So you're going to be there year in and year out. You just kind of have to break through that door, and you're gonna have to beat Alabama once you get there. So I think this Ohio State team and everyone that's a fan of the Ohio State Buckeyes, I think you're okay. I know it's no such thing as moral victories, and I know you don't want to make excuses with the health of Justin Fields, with Trey Sermon going out. You still expect to win, even with the injury that Justin Fields suffered in that Clemson game, even if the injury that Trey Sermon, suffered early on in that first possession, because you recruit so well. So you just plug and play those players that you recruit. So I know if you're an Ohio State fan, you expect to win. But once again, you kind of ran into one of the best Nick Saban teams that I think personally he's had to win a national championship. And that's what you're facing year in and year out. So you might get one in the next couple of years, but this past game, it was all about Nick Saban and Alabama. They were on the mission, and they proved it, and they came out with the win, and they was victorious, and hell of a performance for all those guys. But once again, starting next year, those guys are moving on. Nick Saban has to replace a lot of those guys that we're talking about. But when you're Alabama, you don't rebuild, you just reload. So
next wave of first round draft picks. Come on.
Yeah. So maybe Ohio State can kind of, get back to the promised land next year. I know they're going to have to get there without Justin Fields. I tell you that.
Yeah. And I got to say, that's a guy that's been, first off, well said, very well said all the way around, Rob, because if you're Ohio State, we're just chalking up like, well, Alabama's great. Hey, no Ohio State fan expects to lose, period. Okay. You're Ohio State. You shouldn't just bow down to Alabama. You keep building. You try to beat them. It just wasn't your year. You had a lot of things stacked against you. And Alabama had a lot of those things stacked against them, but they just were in an environment that supported them a lot better. I feel like the Big Ten kind of did a half-ass like, we're going to play, not play. Yeah, let's do 21-day quarantines and 6-game minimum for conference titles. Oh, never mind. The Big Ten was just making it up as they go. What a terrible environment to try to achieve excellence in, right? That's hard to do when you don't know what's around the corner. The SEC was supportive. The SEC created an environment where Alabama had some predictability and they knew what was going on. And Alabama, of course, maximizes everything under Saban too. So I think Alabama, they faced a lot of the same challenges. I'm not trying to say they didn't or underlie like how much they had to overcome as well, but it was a little different in Big Ten country than it was in SEC country this year. And we saw a lot of the top. I think the point in case, what other Big Ten program is walking away from this season outside of Bloomington, Indiana, going like, boy, that was a great year of football? Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin? No, nobody's happy. Northwestern, maybe. I don't know. Northwestern and Indiana are like, yeah, they have more of that, more short seasons. Like, I think those schools. There's only a couple of schools that were happy with the way this thing played out in 2020, but even Ohio State fans, it was a really weird season overall. And this team had to overcome a lot of adversity just to get to that spot. So I do want to recognize that with the Buckeyes, even though you expect to be there and you want to beat Alabama. All right. I'm going to go sports topic, sports radio, corny question that we try to stay away from. But you mentioned Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, and I heard you do it. And I don't know if you did that on purpose or if you did that on accident, but this has been an Ohio State, Alabama conversation the last couple of years. Ohio State's got to be elevated to that third wheel now, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think, under the Alabama winning streak that has been having under Nick Saban, I think, Clemson and Dabo Swinney kind of rattle off 2 national championships. Ohio State has one. So I think, Ohio State is definitely up in that tier 1 with Alabama and Clemson.
We should almost call it Alabama's tier 1. It's a triangle, right? Alabama's on top of on top there. Ohio State and Clemson are making up the base. It's like 1 and 1A. Tier 1 and tier 1A.
I could definitely go with that. The triangle thing with, Alabama being at the top and, Clemson and Ohio State being at the bottom. And that's what it kind of seems like. It's a 3-team race year in and year out. And that's because all 3 of these teams recruit really, really well. And just like I said earlier, they don't rebuild, they reload. So, but one of the key components about, being there year in and year out is having good quarterback play. And we've seen, these 3 teams have good quarterback play over the years. They're not one of those programs who's searching for a quarterback or who's searching for their next star quarterback. Like either they bring them in through the transfer portal or, either they groom them and they're waiting in the wings like Mac Jones. He waited his turn behind, Jalen Hurts and Tua. So I think, if you're Alabama, you're Ohio State, you're Clemson, you're definitely not lacking for talent. I think when it comes to those 3 teams, it really comes to coaching and, the war of attrition, whether, the players are healthy throughout the year, coaching. But as far as talent, I think, it's pretty much equal playing field when it comes to the talent level of these 3 programs.
Think about that Alabama quarterback room a couple of years ago with Jalen Hurts, Tua, and Mac Jones. Mac Jones was the who in that room. Who? That guy? A guy named Mac? Of course, Alabama has a quarterback named Mac. That was about maybe how much you knew about him a couple years ago. But the storyline of what we're going to see in college football, what it's evolved into over the last several years with a transfer portal is like just the automatic solution for everything for a guy with a problem. Man, you get Jalen Hurts, who lost the job to Tua, stuck around, helped Alabama win the SEC title game when they called his number, which was a great story. But then he ends up it best for him to pack it up and move to Norman, Oklahoma for a year, and that worked out great for Jalen. But then you see a guy like Mac who sticks around, and he sticks around, and it worked out great for Mac. So it's like you get to see the story of college football just in that one quarterback room. And it's interesting because we saw that in the SEC this year. Two best quarterbacks in the SEC were Mac Jones and who?
Your buddy Kyle Trask.
And Kyle Trask did what? He stuck around, right? So all these guys who are jumping in the transfer portal expecting greener grass, maybe it's not your year next year. Maybe there is a guy that's going to keep you down on the depth chart, but injuries happen. Kyle Trask got in because of an injury. He didn't get in because he beat Frank Sal. He got in because of an injury. Mac Jones gets in because Tua leaves early for the draft. These guys stuck around. They stuck around, and it ended up working out for them. And we see a more traditional story with Mac Jones, a guy who waits until his senior year and gets a shot and plays great. But we also see story with like Jalen Hurts where it can work out too. So I just think it's super interesting. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but I'm saying you hear so much the transfer portal is like the sexy conversation. It's fun to talk about, but you don't. It's good to shine a light on guys who stick around too and get it done.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, and it goes to show you the character that the quarterbacks like a Mac Jones or a Kyle Trask have. Maybe they're looking themselves in the mirror and saying, hey, I have to look at myself in the mirror and I have to work on getting better as a quarterback, getting better as a leader, kind of galvanizing the troops to have them believe in me. And I think that's what Mac Jones and Kyle Trask did. And
right.
it paid off for them. And both of those guys were, Heisman Trophy finalists. So
right.
I think that just goes to show you like, hey, maybe just like you said, Nick, maybe the grass is not always greener on the other side. And maybe some of these guys need to, take a look in the mirror and say, hey, what can I fix to make me actually get a chance to step on the field, get me an opportunity to play, whether it's sticking around, working on, throwing the deep ball, whether it's working on throwing the slant. I think, just watching Tua, just the transition when, Nick Saban went from Jalen Hurts to Tua, I've never seen a quarterback throw a perfect slant pass than Tua in the college game, and it worked to perfection for him. And Devontae Smith was actually on the other end of that pass that he threw when he came in after he spelled Jalen Hurts. And then, to go out and win a Heisman and go out to win the offensive MVP of a national championship game, it just goes to show you that, hey, iron sharpens iron, and that, sometimes you kind of have to wait your opportunity. And that's what not only Mac Jones did, but Devontae Smith did that, sitting behind Henry Ruggs,
Right.
Jerry
Think
Jeudy.
about that receiver room.
Yeah,
Right.
and all those guys. So I mean, when you have that type of talent that you have at Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama, you're not necessarily going to come in and play right away. Sometimes you kind of have to work on getting better, and I think this is what these programs do. So I think I am a fan of the transfer portal to a certain extent, but just like you said, the grass is not always greener on the other side.
Yeah, and the grass is definitely greener on the other side if you're a 5-star quarterback who's starting behind a guy that you're better than, and your highlight of the year is that Kirby Smart puts you in for a fake punt. That's a terrible play. Then the grass is greener, right? In Justin Fields' case.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The argument can go both ways. It's not even a right or wrong thing for me. It's just like, make sure you're really evaluating both sides before you make the decision. That's really my big point, is like, make sure you're really thinking about, hey, if I stay, I might be behind for a couple of years, but that third year, I'm definitely the guy on that, and who knows, they can always bring someone in, transfer portal, all the other stuff. But a guy like Matt Jones, Kyle Trask, they bet on themselves. It paid off this year. Cool story. Justin Fields worked out with the transfer portal just like it did with Jalen Hurts. So like it's cool that college football has added this element, and we're seeing these different stories kind of intertwined now. And I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was an interesting dynamic between the two quarterbacks last night. The other thing too, Justin Fields. Here we are again. Everyone after the Indiana game, where Justin Fields, in my opinion, he just was sloppy and forcing it and made a couple bad decisions, threw a few picks in that game. The Northwestern game, where he flat out did not play great, was missing a lot of his receiving core. They created a lot of chatter. Is Justin Fields really the second best guy in the draft? Is he really the guy to take behind Trevor Lawrence? Well, after the Clemson game, those questions were put to bed. Nobody was talking about that. Nobody was talking about Zach Wilson anymore at number 2. But then after last night's game, you're starting to see that stuff creep back again on Twitter and everything. And I just want to say I watched Justin Fields play a lot at Ohio State the last couple of years. He's easily the best quarterback I've ever seen in a Buckeye uniform. And Ohio State's not known for producing like NFL quarterbacks necessarily. They produce backup quarterbacks in the NFL a lot of times, but in this case, like this guy's absolutely elite. I think he's the right, just a notch below what Trevor Lawrence is. And you could even argue on his best day, he's better than Trevor Lawrence. And I think we saw that in the Sugar Bowl. So what do you think about Justin Fields as an NFL prospect? If you're the number 2, if you hold the number 2 pick in the draft, are you picking him?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I think you should pick Justin Fields at the number 2 spot. You know, in the NFL, it's a quarterback league. You're not going to win too many games if you don't have a quarterback. And let's just look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen was a 0 star coming out of high school. He didn't have a lot of offers. And look at Josh Allen right now in year 3. He's up there in the MVP conversation. And look what he can do with a legitimate wide receiver and Stephon Diggs on the outside. So I think Justin Fields definitely has, the arm talent to make all the throws on the next level. He definitely has the athletic ability, to move the pocket and to kind of scramble when he needs to. I do think he's not a developmental project, but I do think he's still a little bit raw. I mean, definitely coming over, transferred from Georgia to Ohio State. Ohio State doesn't really play that pro-style scheme that you would see at Georgia or whatever. Ohio State kind of opened up the offense a little bit more. But, hey, that's where the NFL game is going. So I think, you're going to have to get a person like Justin Fields right now to be at the quarterback position so he can have flexibility within that offense. And I tell you what, everyone was knocking Lamar Jackson for not winning the playoff game, and then he got his first playoff win. But I tell you what, right now, Justin Fields is a better thrower of the ball than Lamar Jackson, and we've seen what Lamar Jackson has done in the NFL. He's won an MVP. He just won his first playoff game. And I tell you what, Lamar Jackson might win multiple playoff games the way if he keeps running the ball like that. So I think, the outside noise in regards to Justin Fields, if he's the guy or that he should be the number 2 pick, I just think that is all noise. Coming out of high school as a 5-star kid, everybody wanted him. The talent that he possessed, and I think he can only get better. So I tell you that, so I would definitely go with Justin Fields in that number 2 draft pick if I was the Jets.
I put him in the class where if you're the Jaguars, you're looking at Lawrence or Fields. I'm serious. I think Fields he's an absolute franchise changer the second you pick him. I know Lawrence is considered the can't miss guy, and that's why he's up there and everything. But we could maybe even do an entire episode dedicated to that debate. But we're not going to get into all the little schematics right now. But I think with Fields, you just saw him. I mean, a lot was put on his plate in this game, right? You're throwing a lot of passes in this game, and there is no freaking way the man was 100%. And he said 95%. No way. Don't believe it. I think that hit and the way he was moving after that Clemson game, and he was audibly groaning when he's sitting down in the press conference. I don't know, man. I'm putting him at like 65-70% at most last night.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, just like I said, I'm pretty sure Justin Fields and Ohio State team does not want to make any excuses, but I'm not making any excuses as well. But I can just watch in the game. It's no way that Justin Fields was 100%. But hey, it's football. You grit it out. You show your toughness, and I think he showed his toughness. Going up against the Alabama defense and going up against the Clemson defense. Back to back. I know he didn't have the best performance against Alabama, but hey. I mean, I don't think, it was more, I think it was more so on the defense side of the ball, just like I, pointed out earlier. I think, the offense could have gotten going if the defense got a little bit more stops, if the defense, kind of gave Justin Fields more of a short field. I think he could have gotten going a little bit more. He could have used his legs a little bit more. But once again, when you're one-dimensional, it's going to be kind of hard to beat Alabama.
I was expecting a lot more running of the ball out of Justin Fields, and I think the fact that he didn't, I think that's a great point there. I think the fact that he didn't shows that he was pretty banged up going into that, but you probably won't hear it from the guy, which is another reason why I like him. I like him he just seems like a good, steady dude. And if I'm pulling the trigger as an NFL GM, I'd feel great about picking him in this spring's draft here. All right, Alabama. We got to turn to the national champs. That's our Ohio State recap on the season. Good season for the Buckeyes. Ryan Day and the Bucks. They'll be back next year, no doubt, competing for a playoff spot. But Alabama, just the steady force that is Alabama under Nick Saban. Man, we got to do a case study on why they just don't. You just don't see, like, Florida was a good example this year, right? Great team when they're at 100%. The Texas A&M game, the LSU game, not their best stuff. They get burned, they lose. You don't see that. Like, where are those bad games? Like, Alabama just doesn't have a day. Oh, we lost to Missouri. Like, that just doesn't happen under Saban. And granted, you got an insane amount of talent on the roster, but we've seen that happen with Ohio State. Clemson's lost to Pitt. Like, there's been losses. Teams get upset sometimes. Like, this team, this organization, whatever mafia in Alabama, whatever you want to call it, it's unbelievable. No organization has this amount of consistency in business and life, whatever. How in the hell do they keep doing this year after year?
Yeah, I mean that's the Nick Saban, mentality. I think he preaches discipline, and that's what you see with this Alabama team. You don't see those mental hiccups that you see, that plagues other teams. I mean, perfect example. You saw the Florida game against LSU. You see, Marco Wilson make a great tackle, on fourth down to, make LSU punt the ball back. But he I don't know if he gets so excited or whatever the case may be, he picks up the shoe and he throws it 20 yards down the field. You just don't see those type of things, plaguing the Alabama team year in and year out. And I tell you what, in order to beat Alabama, you have to beat Alabama because they're not going to beat themselves. So when Clemson knocked off Alabama, Deshaun Watson went out and beat Alabama. Alabama didn't make too many mistakes in that game. And I tell you what, Clemson was just a better team on that particular day. So if you're going to beat Alabama, you want to reach the top of the mountain, you're going to have to knock them off. And Nick Saban and this Alabama team is not going to give you help by putting the ball on the ground, throwing interceptions, fumbling the ball, making stupid penalties, getting busted coverages. You're not going to see that too much with Alabama. And it goes to show that Nick Saban is definitely one of the best coaches ever. I mean, college or NFL. I know he flamed out in the NFL, but hey, you definitely have to put him in a conversation of being one of the best football coaches ever, not just on the collegiate level.
I think there's something that all college football fans can agree on. There's something off about the AT&T commercials with that girl when she turns her head at the end. It's a little creepy, right? We can all agree on that. And we also can agree on the fact that Nick Saban and Alabama don't beat themselves. And I want to talk about something that I think that college football fans as a whole pretty much agree on. Why do defensive backs, and you're seeing this in the pros, and I feel like this has become a thing in the last 5 to 10 years, but we've seen it more and more every year, I feel like. But what's the deal with the DBs who always have to, on every incompletion, do the incomplete side? They're running in. They were 10 yards away from the incompletion. It was an overthrown ball, and they're doing incomplete, right? And getting in the receiver's face. Saw a lot of that out of the Florida DBs who weren't particularly great this year, right? Did you see that from Alabama last night?
No, and I think that's just Nick Saban preaching discipline. I think you when you come to Alabama, you expect to win, and you expect to do it in a classy, professional way. And I think Nick Saban prepares you for the NFL. He knows college football is a business, and he knows that in order to, get the best out of these kids, going through the program and putting them on the next level, that it has to be professional. It has to be business-like. And that's what you see from Alabama week in and week out. Oh, no nonsense type approach. And you know what? He's going to get the best of all of his players. Now, I think, do I want Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith on punt return and kickoff return week in and week out, knowing that, it's people behind him that can get the job done? Maybe not.
Yeah.
But once again, I'm not Nick Saban, and I don't have 7 national championships under my belt. So I mean, it works for him, and the players buy in. So I think it's one big family, and Nick Saban just preaches that discipline, and that's what you see year in and year out with Alabama teams. You just don't see those mental mistakes.
Do no other programs preach discipline?
Yeah, I mean, but
I know we always hear that. That's always the common refrain about it. But what is it that he says that nobody else is saying?
I mean,
he says it to 5-star players. You could say that. He says it to a room full of 5-star players. That could be something.
Yeah, that definitely could be something. But I tell you what, I don't think he has to say much. I think he,
at
he
this
just
point, no.
I think he just holds up his hand and he just shows off his rings. He just, push all his rings to the middle of the table and just say, hey, this is, if you come here, this is what's expected of you. And, if you don't like it, hey, here's the door. So I think, all the players just buy in. They just want to win. And that's what you see from Alabama year in and year out.
Yeah, and I know those rings are good, but I could do it without another season of Nick Saban doing Aflac commercials, though. I could do without another season of that. Hey, last question, Rob. I again, corny sports radio question here. Was this the best ever college football team? Because I think we're too quick to declare things the best ever. But considering the circumstances, this is the argument that's being made of how inconsistent this season was, that you played a conference-only schedule. They didn't play any like FCS or Group of 5. They played straight up SEC and then playoff opponents, and they annihilated everyone. Averaged, I mean, if they weren't at 50, they were close to 50 a game. Unbelievable season for Alabama as they end up finishing 13-0 here. Or not 13-0, 12-0. I'm sorry. They end up finishing 12-0. Unbelievable season for the Tide. But are you biting on that best ever thing? Because I could maybe make an argument that the defense would hold you back from that.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I know sometimes we're prisoners of the moment and we kind of get caught up in, things that just happened. That's things that's just fresh on our mind. And I tell you what, everyone's talking about, this Alabama team might be the best ever. Maybe you can throw their name in the hat or whatever. But at the end of the day, just like you said, Nick, this defense is, not the typical Alabama defense that we normally see. Yeah, they have playmakers on that side of the ball, but it's not the dominant defense performance that we've seen for Alabama.
Who is dominant, though, these days? Is that just a product of the evolution of football?
I think it is, but I mean, we saw LSU last year under Joe Burrow. We seen them put up, dominant defensive performances. I know Joe Burrow and that offense was clicking on all cylinders, but at the end of the day, that defense was just, flat out good, especially to the latter part of the season. I know early in the year they were kind of banged up early on, with Grant Delpit being a little bit hurt. Derek Stingley Jr. kind of being a little bit banged up, Patrick McQueen. But just look at all those players that got put into the NFL draft. And I just don't. For sure. Yeah. The talent was definitely there, and I think they kind of got it going later on into the season, and they were definitely dominant on both sides of the ball. And just like I said, we've seen a Clemson team be dominant on both sides of the ball under Deshaun Watson. We've seen, a Texas team pretty dominant under Vince Young. So it's so many. Even though this might be the best offensive talent we've seen from Alabama, like the best offensive look so far, I think, some of those national championship Alabama teams can beat this one.
Yeah, I do think that Alabama, I mean, yeah, I don't even know if the 2020 Alabama team is the best Alabama team ever. That's an argument in and of itself, right? Yeah, I don't know. I honestly kind of get the best ever type arguments, they get boring after a while. So I think they're kind of dumb questions. That's why we don't get into that stuff too much. But that's one talking point I've seen a lot. And I just wanted to mostly dismantle that because I think, hey, yeah, great season. But there's plenty of other Alabama teams that were capable of doing what this Alabama team did as well. And I know their style's a little different. They put up more points, but they also give up a lot more points. So
yeah,
it's a lot. It's just you trade one thing for the other. So good season by Alabama. Great season by Alabama, I should say. Great season by the Buckeyes. And we made it. We made it to the end of the coronavirus football season. I think everybody's happy and they were proud of the accomplishment. But make no mistake about it, this is the worst season of our lifetimes. Hopefully, fingers crossed, this doesn't go into the next football season and we get our non-conference play back and we get steady games and nothing's canceled. Hopefully, that all comes back with vaccines coming out here. But give me your total summation of the 2020 football season. What are you going to look back on in 10 years and remember about this year? Because I'm just going to remember the stressful cluster of it, and really the game that's going to probably stand out in my memory 10 years from now is that Coastal Carolina BYU game. That it was like a backyard football game they put together in 5 minutes. That I think that's going to be the legacy of 2020.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one game that's going to stand out for me in the next 10 years. And just like I said, this national championship game is also going to be a game that's going to stand out. Not so much because of Alabama won another national championship, but just the dominant performance that Devontae Smith put together in the first half. It really just seems like he was unguardable. I know Sean Wade, I spoke about it earlier. Sean Wade came out and said, who I want to guard. And, he didn't do a good job. But at the end of the day, the defensive scheme that Ohio State was running really didn't put him in a good space to have a good night against Devontae Smith, because he really should have been getting double teamed no matter where he went. But with that being said, I'm definitely going to remember, the ups and downs of the season, the postponements of the game. But, everyone just trying to come together to trying to get the season finished, to get a national championship crown. And, I know we talked about the Big Ten kind of dropping the ball early on, but, coming back around, trying to put a Big Ten season together.
Tried.
And they did to a certain
reluctantly.
They did to a certain extent. So, but at the end of the day, I just want to just tip my hat off to all the student athletes out there who actually, provided us entertainment week in and week out, and, putting themselves and their families in risk, even though they were kind of playing in a semi bubble. But at the end of the day, I enjoyed it. Was it the best football season that we've seen? No. But at the end of the day, I was definitely appreciative of it. And, I'm one of the big college football fans out there. So, any college football is good college football. So that's what I have to take away from this season. And, hopefully, just like you said, next year, fans is going to be back in the stands, 100,000 strong, 90,000 strong at these large arenas. Yeah. You got the Swamp, you got the Horseshoe. You go down to Michigan, Penn State, the whiteout. We didn't get to see a whiteout game this year. So I think, moving forward, I think, as a college fan, more fans are going to be more appreciative of the game, and they're definitely going to be more appreciative of the student athletes and the players.
Oh man, I think the comeback stories are going to be fun. And let's hope it's in 2021. Obviously, don't take anything for granted anymore, but gotta think we got 9 months. We got some vaccines starting to roll out. We should get there by the fall, right? We'll be all right by football season, right?
Yeah, I hope
2021.
I really hope so. I really hope so, because it's a lot of games that I wanted to go to, this past season that, I didn't get a chance to go to. So hopefully, the vaccines get rolling out, fans get to go back in the stands, whether we're social distancing or not. But, just having that fan element in college sports, that's what makes college sports, the best to me, whether it's college basketball, whether it's college football, just having that fan element, that student body, the band. Yeah. So just having all of that just makes college football and college sports just that much better. So I'm just so excited to see that come back, hopefully in the 2021 season.
Yeah, and you and I, we love college football, both of us, and actually we love it so much that we've decided, I know I mentioned it on a couple of the previous episodes, but I'll continue to mention it because we are going to cover the NFL through the Super Bowl. But after the Super Bowl, we're going to go into, we'll always do draft talk and recruiting talk and everything, but we will become a college football-centric podcast. This will become entirely devoted to college football. So very much looking forward to that. But we do want to, we made a commitment to finish the NFL season, and we're going to finish that. But hey, hopefully this time next year, hopefully we can get this thing to a point where maybe we're even at the game, Rob.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited for that time to come. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that, once the vaccines get rolling out, just like you mentioned earlier, Nick, that, we would definitely be back in the stands in 2021.
Yeah, looking forward to it, man. Well, Rob, great college football season. By this point, I could use a little break on my Saturday. I could get my Saturdays back. I always miss college football, but by January, you're like, okay, I've had a lot of it, and I could use my Saturdays. But probably by about in 3 weeks, I'll be really missing it again.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You kind of get burned out, watching football, all day on Saturday.
Yeah.
But you got your Thursday night games, you got your Friday night games. So me just being a college football fan that I'm in, I'm probably watching, college football, all week, and then on Sunday watching the pros. So
right.
I can definitely use a day to kind of wind down or whatever, and not have the TV on football all day.
Let me go one more topic for you, because I just thought of it here. Because last night I was fighting through traffic. I went and watched the game at my parents' last night because my mom's an Ohio State grad, loves Buckeye football. It's one of the reasons why I have a problem with football, because it was highly encouraged in my household growing up. And sitting around all day and watching college football was highly encouraged, I should say. And so I went down there to watch the game. But you have to work all day, and then you have to fight traffic to get down. It's like Monday night, and you got to work tomorrow, and you're going to be up late. It's like, it just didn't have, it's not like Super Bowl Sunday is its own day, right? Like, you have the build up. It's fantastic. And it's all dedicated to the Super Bowl. We even call it Super Bowl Sunday. What's with like Monday? It's like a hangover Monday for the national championship game. You're getting over the holidays. Everyone's back from vacation and everything, because maybe even some people sprinkled in a little extra vacation day after the new year last week. But literally almost everybody's back by this Monday. Back to work, everything else. Do you feel like that the Monday game, especially after watching 6 wildcard games this weekend, do you feel like it's like a little bit anticlimactic on that stage?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you in that regards. Just having it on Monday, and then of course you have that build up, but not really like Super Bowl Sunday or whatever like that. It's more so aligned with the teams that are playing in, and I think one of the reasons why you kind of see that not so anticlimactic is the fact that you kind of have the same teams playing year in and year out. You're gonna have those Alabama fans, year in and year out. They're gonna be hyped. You're gonna have your Ohio State fans. You're gonna have your Clemson fans. But it really just seems like it's a 3-4 team race to win the national championship year in and year out. So you're not gonna have that big fan base or that big eyeballs on this particular game. But I do think having it on the money does hurt it to a certain extent.
Yeah, I don't have an awesome solution. I guess the only thing I can think of off the top of my head, maybe we'll do some little brainstorming in the offseason and come up with some plans. But man, I think a semifinals around Christmas and the final game on New Year's Day would crush. I think that would do great.
Yeah, I mean that would definitely be a way to kind of solve, that build up and kind of have more eyes on the national championship game. But anytime you have the blue bloods in the final games, I think you're gonna have the rowdiness of the fans. You're gonna have that big build up. But once again, compared to Super Bowl Sunday in the lead up to that particular game, I really think the national championship is lacking in that regards.
Yeah. Bump the Heisman Trophy, figure out another day for the Heisman Trophy, play the first set of playoff games on the Army-Navy, let Army-Navy be at noon, and then the playoff games be at 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock. And then take a couple weeks, build up for the national title game on New Year's Day. That's the way to do it, man. That's the way to do it right there. Just solve that problem.
Yeah. That was a good way to fix that one, Nick.
Yeah. I don't want it Monday, January 11th. Like, I'm like, dude, I need to put my Christmas tree away. Like, I'm ready to get back to work. This is a weird day to be like watching a college football game.
We might have to find some way to get you on that college football playoff committee, Nick.
Yeah. So I could pick Notre Dame again.
No more Notre Dame. No more Notre Dame in the playoffs.
Let me tell you about why their 2 losses were awesome. Let me tell you why. All right. Rob, good episode, man. Had a good time talking about college football with you this season. We're officially moving into off-season mode. We'll get into some recruiting news, and we'll get into some actual stories. That's the name of the podcast, American Football Stories. We'll get into some stories that we'll cover throughout the offseason. Hope to get some interviews and everything else and keep providing content. We will be going. We're never going to stop 365 days a year, right, Rob?
That's right. That's right.
Right.
It's been a blast. It's been a blast. I had fun doing this, inaugural season for us on the podcast, just doing college football and NFL. But just like you said earlier, we're definitely going to transition to be, a college football only pod. Definitely going to sprinkle in some NFL in there, here and there. But for the most part, definitely going to be focused on the college football landscape. Just like you said, from the recruiting aspects, just from the stories, just tradition, everything that surrounds college football and makes it is what it is today. So it's been a blast, and I'm ready to get back to it. We're going to be talking about, National Signing Day. It's going to be right around the corner. So we're definitely going to be back talking about that.
Looking forward to it, man. All right, this has been another episode of the American Football Stories podcast, and we'll send you out with a word from our sponsor, Coach Paint. American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly telestrate video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
Thank you for listening to American Football Stories podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, American Football Stories. We are working to grow our network on YouTube and we'd love to have you subscribe. You can find us also on Apple Podcasts, on Twitter at American FB Story, and on our website, AmericanFootballStories.com. I am Robert Parker. My co-host is Nick Knudsen. This has been another episode of American Football Stories.